All righty then. Sorry, I had to flip over. I just wanted to make sure that I actually hit start. So, welcome to my master bedroom. um, we go in, so I'm recording this Sunday afternoon at exactly 12:02. Oh, and breaking news, the Phoenix Suns have agreed to extend Mikal Bridges on a 4-year, $90 million contract. That's interesting. That just happened. So let's rock and roll. I never really know exactly how long a recorded lecture is going to be. So I expect it to be a little bit shorter. I've got an assignment for you guys to do. You're going to need to do both. You're going to need to watch the lecture and do the assignment for your participation. And what I require of you for participation is that you take some handwritten notes and then you attach those with the assignment. The assignment too will be short, but they'll both kind of give us an accumulation for an entire class. So just know for participation, you need to send me handwritten notes or typed notes, by the way. I would like you to email those to me, handwritten or typed notes, and then with the written assignment, which is, again, not going to be difficult. So we now are entering into topic 4. So after this topic, in fact, I think after this week, we are officially halfway through the semester. So it is flying by. Definitely after this topic, we are halfway through the semester. We're going to be over halfway through the semester. So, just make sure that you're staying on pace, keeping up everything. Don't fall behind. If you've got a question about your grade, come to me, come to one of the IAs, when we're in class, Jeremy or Cheyenne, and just let's stay on track. So I don't want anybody to worry. But we are now, this topic 4 is going to be the 3 institutions, which is going to be the 3 branches of the federal government, the legislative, the judicial, and the executive. And we're going to really dive deeper into it. We're going to do a couple more case studies as we did before in regards to the Bill of Rights. Not today, but we will do that in class. And today we're going to open with, as you can see, the Congress. I just want to point out real quick, this picture that is on the screen, that is of the nation's capital. If you did not know, both the House of Representatives and the Senate work within the nation's capital. They don't have offices in that building. They've got office buildings outside of the Capitol. But this is where all the legislative work occurs. And so where's my mouse? Hopefully you can see my mouse. On the, as you can see on our right is the House side, and on our left is the Senate side. And these are the steps into the Capitol right in here. Actually, that's for the public. The congressmen and staff actually go down here. I was very blessed to have worked for the House of Representatives from 2010 to 2012. And so when I was in D.C., then you would walk down here, and it was pretty cool. I should have brought my badge. I don't actually know where my badge is. It's in storage somewhere, but I should have brought my badge for the camera. If I can find it, I'll bring it to class. But, it's just, I would just flash the badge, and security would just let you walk right in. It was really neat. At one point, I was even walking around the halls of Congress by myself, unguided. Like if you're a civilian, I was still a civilian. If you were just kind of like a normal citizen who was just there to kind of visit and tour, you would have never been allowed to do what I was able to do. But the only thing I didn't get to do, which I'm bummed, but a bunch of my friends got to do, was that I never got to go into the dome. You can actually go into the dome. You can actually go up into here, but really only staff. And I never got a chance to do it. In fact, if I recall correctly, the reason I didn't was because it was closed off for, I feel like it was because it was closed off for, what's it called? For repairs or something to that effect. So it was closed, if I recall correctly. It's been over 10 years, but anyway, so just really cool. So if you've never had a chance to go to the Capitol, I highly recommend going to D.C. at some point, going to the Capitol. All right, so let's rock and or roll. Just remember, you have to show me handwritten notes or typed notes. You have emails to me, and then with the assignment secondarily. So let's look at some of the congressional powers. Obviously, the primary thing that we know about Congress is they're the ones that write the laws, or at least they write the bills that if the president signs into law or signs an agreement, they become law. So they're definitely like the primary deliberative body of government. And they were designed to actually be the most, air quote, powerful branch in the government. Over time, the president has really kind of taken over as the most powerful singular person. As I've said before, and I'll continue to say, the office of president was designed to be a lowercase k king. That was the truth. he is definitely he, and then I'm sure in our lives of future, she will be. Whoa, hello. Let me just double check to make sure that didn't stop recording. We're still recording. Okay, cool. I'm sure at some point we'll have a female president in our lives, so in which case a lowercase q queen. But regardless, the powers of the office have definitely evolved over time to kind of more closely remember an uppercase K. The ability for a president to use the executive order as a means of doing their will, and the executive order holding the teeth of, or at least the grip, I've always said the grip of law, although without the teeth, it's a very, very powerful tool in getting their way, even when the Congress, the primary deliberative and lawmaking body, disagrees. So, of course, though, I mean, their base responsibility is, and their primary power is that of making the laws. It is the president's job to enforce the laws. It is not supposed to be the president's job to write the laws. But again, that has changed over time. Although something that I have definitely discussed in the past, and I'm sure you probably kind of know, the Congress has given a lot of power to the president. That's the other thing. The Congress over time has said, we don't have the time nor the, as well as to the bureaucracy, we do not have the time nor the inclination to be able to handle all of these affairs as the government, as the nation has grown and expanded, become more and more complex. The Congress has recognized that they don't have, or at least claimed that they don't have the time nor the inclination to be able to handle a bunch of things. So they give responsibility to a bureaucratic arm of the government, which is essentially then overseen by the president. So they transferred a lot of power to the president, which is then, of course, provided the president with a lot more power and made the president closer and closer to an uppercase K king. So Congress also does have the power to decide the form and function of executive departments and the lower courts, but by deciding, it is up to Congress to create a new department for the president to oversee. So, the Department of Education, the Department of Transportation, the Department of Agriculture, the Department of Health and Human Services, all of those were formed by the Congress and formed with the idea that, hey, we don't have time to regulate and to debate and write laws on all of these millions and millions of things that throughout a complex society needs to be regulated. And issues need to be decided upon. So they create a bureaucracy, they give the power of overseeing to the president, and then they step away. So they therefore have the power to take, except that, let's say, for the sake of argument, the Congress were to say, we want to get rid of the Department of Education. And if the president doesn't sign on to that, then, and if the president vetoes that law and the Congress doesn't have the numbers to be able to override a veto with this 2/3 supermajority, then it stays. So that's kind of the worst of it, is they can pretty freely give power to the president, but they pretty much don't have the power to then take it away, per se, without the president's approval. And what president is going to eagerly usurp power and give power up? Unfortunately, once power has been claimed, it is difficult to take away. So it's just one of those things, but, for better or worse. In some cases, better, in some cases, worse. So congressional membership, most members of Congress are what are known as professional politicians, in that they spend their career while in office focused on the job of being a congressman, whether it's in the House or the Senate. Many of them will have jobs, and many of them will have had jobs and careers that gave them the money and the time to be able to run for Congress. The vast majority of them were because of that. I mean, every once in a while you'll get a professor who, professors can make good money, but for the most part, I mean, like, it is definitely a salary jump in their case to be congressmen. So in most cases, though, these congressmen are able to then step away from their careers, or retire from their career and focus entirely on being in Congress, meaning that they, do not have time to focus on other jobs. So House and Senate members make about $175,000 a year. That's kind of the base salary, which obviously is pretty good money. So if, however, a member of the House or the Senate enters into a leadership position, we'll get into leadership positions here soon, then they actually do get a salary increase. Incumbents, that is somebody who's been elected once. Once you've been elected once and you enter a term for re-election, the term for that person is called an incumbent. They have a 90% probability of winning re-election. Most of that is because many states have lopsided districts, and that the districts are pretty heavily designed to be Republican or pretty heavily designed to be Democrat. So I would say that, 1/3 to maybe a little bit more than a third are just solid Democrat or really never going to change. 1/3 are pretty much solid Republican to a little bit more solid Republican or never going to change. And then the rest, which is about a third to, close to a quarter, are your moderate districts. That's for the House. For the Senate, it's obviously statewide, but for the House, that's kind of how it's set up. And so because of that, then those congressmen on both the right and the left, right on my side, left on my side, they are pretty much solidly locked in for at least 10 years. So this term is called gerrymandering, but it's also, sometimes unavoidable. Take San Francisco, for instance. There are almost no Republicans in San Francisco. So is it really gerrymandering to create a district around San Diego that's going to just solidly vote Democrat? No. So, whatever. I don't need to get into that. So that said, some districts obviously, in certain instances during campaigns and election cycles, they will, depending on kind of the national mood, that congressman can lose, and then there are other reasons to do it. But for the most part, I'm just going to move on. 90% of the time, the incumbent stays in office. So representatives and senators concentrate, unfortunately, on what is known as pork barrel spending, and then as on their service strategy. So pork barrel spending is adding amendments to larger bills that bring in money that benefit only their individual districts. So let's just say, for the sake of argument, I'm a congressman who represents the area around Grand Canyon. Something that I might do is on a larger national bill, I will essentially sell my vote to whoever the sponsors are of that larger bill and say, I will vote for that if you add in $2 million to help, improve Grand Canyon. That's money that I can then divert to Grand Canyon. Or, if you give me $150,000 so I can build a bridge over some major street in which there's a lot of walking traffic, or yada, yada, yada. So that's called pork barrel. There's reasons for that, but just know that that's the term. And so a lot of congressmen will do that. They'll be like, okay, yeah, I'll vote for your bill, or I'll vote for this big bill if you add in a couple extra $1 million here and there, so that way it benefits my district. So then I can come home to the district and say, look at all this money I brought in for this district alone. In theory, that was not what the founders had thought was going to be a primary action of congressmen. Yes, congressmen were going to come in and represent their small district, their kind of small piece of the national pie. And yes, they were going to fight for issues that were going to benefit their district, but they were going to fight for these issues kind of on a national scale. Like if it benefits my district, it's obviously going to benefit a lot of districts because, citizens, human beings were all kind of relative. But what has happened is over time, and it's definitely more in the last 100 years or less, this idea of pork barrel of like, just give me more money for my little district, specifically for my district, bring me federal money, and then I'll vote for this bill. But if you think about it, let's just say, for the sake of argument, again, I'm a representative in Congress that that represents the area around Grand Canyon. That also means that the money that get brought in, that was part of that money came from taxpayers in Maine. Part of that money came from taxpayers in Hawaii. Part of that money came from taxpayers in Texas. Part of that money came from taxpayers in Utah. Part of that money came from taxpayers in other, in Tucson, which is an area that I don't represent. So, I'm just taking money from everybody and I'm funneling it in. But the thing is, all 435 congressmen do that. Maybe not all 435. Maybe there are some who are very like, no, I'm not going to sell my votes. I'm going to bring money in. That's fine. They run the risk of not being able to come home and tell their constituents, look at all this money I brought in. But regardless, so when it's happening all the time, that means all of our tax dollars, they're not going to just our district. They're going to pay for pet projects all across the country. So, and then service strategy, I'll get you more in a moment. I think that's the next slide. So just know that the congressman also focused on service strategy a lot. And that was something that I did specifically when I worked for the House. That was pretty much, it was my what would it be? It was in my job description, but in invisible ink. So I'll explain in a second. So House members must be at least 25 years of age and have been a citizen of the United States for at least 7 years. So you do not have to be born in the United States. You just have to have lived here for at least 7 years, well, excuse me, not just lit. You have to have been a citizen of the United States for at least 7 years, and you have to be at least 25 years old. So for most of you guys, you'll be technically able to run for Congress within the next, depending on your age, within the next 5 or 6 years. You'll be able to be a member of the House of Representatives. A senator must be at least 30 years old and have been a citizen for at least 9 years. So for most of you, you'll be able to run for the Senate in about 10 years. Senators and representatives must be residents of the state in which they were elected, although in the Constitution it does not say for like the House that you have had to have lived in a certain district. In fact, in Arizona, you do not have to live in the congressional district that you're running. And hypothetically, again, me living in Glendale and Phoenix, I could run for office in Tucson. Will Tucsonians like that? No, which is why, nobody ever does it that way. I shouldn't say nobody ever does, but it's very rare for that to happen. Sometimes people have enough wealth to buy just homes in multiple parts of the state and then just say, oh, this is my primary home down here in Tucson, when their whole lives they've been living in Prescott. But regardless, you don't necessarily technically have to live in most states in the district that you're running, and if you're running for the House. Women account for about 26.7% of the membership of Congress, and minorities, so really just anybody that isn't, so white they're clear like me, make up less than about 23% membership. However, they do make up in Congress the approximate breakdown of the national population. So while women are a little bit less underrepresented, represented, minorities are about equally represented as by their national representation. Hopefully that made sense. So into that other term, remember over here I said, representatives concentrate on borough spending and service strategy. So what was service strategy? Well, service strategy is when congressional staffers, those people who work for the senator or the congressman, spend most of their time servicing the constituency or serving the constituency. And you're really, as a staff member, you're going out of the way to do anything you possibly can to appease your constituents. When they call in, they've got a problem, you'll find a solution. You do as much as you can. You go out into public as representatives of your congressman, and you like I did diaper drives, for newborn babies. What else did we do? We sent out mailers. So I wrote mailers that were then printed on these big blue cards and mailed to thousands and thousands of people in the district, updating what the congressman was doing and updating his positions on certain issues and so on and so forth. So the staffers then, there's kind of two layers of staff. Those people who focus primarily on the legislation, they don't do as much service strategy because their goal is just to know everything they possibly can about every bill to then be able to inform the congressman. He is they are his kind of eyes and ears on the ground of legislation. Then there's the second, and they're not necessarily beneath it, they're equal, they're just two different parts. The second was more of what I did. I represented the congressman when he wasn't there. I was one of a staff of, there were 5 of us, but there were 3 of us in particular whose primary, or 2 of us actually in particular, whose primary focus was when the congressman isn't in town, I was his eyes and ears on the ground. I was the one meeting with constituents on his behalf. I was going out to events and speaking on his behalf. I gave speeches on his behalf. I then wrote speeches for him when he was out of town. I took phone calls from constituents and then spoke to government not just representatives, but other offices within the federal government, and helped constituents resolve issues that they were having at the federal government with different agencies and so forth. So that service strategy was you are doing everything you possibly can to make your congressman look good, while he or she is then off in D.C. working on legislation. So each member receives approximately $800,000, in allowance in a year to hire up to 18 permanent staff members. However, it starts out much smaller your first term, especially in the House, because in the House you're elected every 2 years. The money that comes in is is smaller because they want to make sure that you can win re-election. The moment you win re-election, you're in there for a second year. Again, that incumbency, 90%, that 90% re-election rate kicks in. And so now it's like, okay, now you're going to be here for the long haul. So then they give you more and more money. You can hire more and more staffers. Senators' allowances, so that was for the House. For the Senate, their allowances range from $2 to $4 million a year, depending on the population size of their state. So, of course, if you're in Montana, where your population of the state is only about 700,000, 750,000, something like that, they're going to be those senators are going to have a lot less money than somebody who's, let's say, in California, where they've got, tens of millions of people as a senator that you are representing. So they obviously need a much larger staff because they're going to have a lot more of a caseload of constituent issues. And then senators jump right in with their kind of maximum allotted, unless they receive some sort of leadership position. And that's because a senator's there for 6 years, guaranteed, versus a House member who's only guaranteed for 2 years. Then each congressman and senators, so each members of the House or the Senate, they have what is called franking, which used to be like a stamp, and well, it still is a stamp actually. It's a stamp that's placed on all postage that is official from the congressman's office. He doesn't have to pay for it. You just get that stamp and you mail it out, and you don't have to pay for stamps. And then they also get free trips back home, so and back and forth. So congressmen, Washington, D.C. is pretty far. So for somebody out here on really for anybody in the country, a flight is going to be pretty expensive for the individual. But certainly if you're going further and farther East Coast, think about congressmen from Hawaii or Alaska. Those flights are not only very long, but they can be very expensive. So they can frank those tickets. In other words, they get those for free, so that way they can more freely travel back and forth to meet with their constituents as often as they can. I can't speak to Alaska and Hawaii because those flights are going to be so long, but lots of congressmen will actually fly home every weekend. They'll get done Friday midday, and then they'll jump on a flight and be home Friday, night, and then they'll leave first thing Monday morning, and they'll get in Monday afternoon in D.C. That happens all the time. And so here in Arizona, if you're on the right flight, you'll the first flight to DC on Monday morning, you'll likely sit on a plane with multiple congressmen. And while I have never, I'm not sure if that's ever, that might have happened to me once or twice, but I've heard from people who I know who work in DC regularly or go back and forth to DC regularly that they'll get a ticket, they'll sit down, and boom, they're sitting next to a congressman. It's like, hey, we're going to share a flight next to one another. So again, if you get on the right flight Friday out of DC or Monday back to DC, you absolutely will share flights with congressmen. All right, so here's just a couple of terms that we need to kind of discuss. So pitfalls of the incumbency. So again, the incumbency is somebody who is in office and is going to be there for a while. So one thing is you can't receive gifts. I'm not going to get into this with any depth, but as a congressman, your office can't receive a gift greater than $25. And the reason is because they don't want bribery. So there was a time that up through the 1970s, there were no gift regulations. And so congressmen were getting bribed big time. They're receiving Super Bowl tickets. They're receiving flights to Rome. They're receiving all expense paid trips from lobbyists and all these things to try to get them to vote for certain legislation and stuff. And some congressmen, it's a very, very powerful and prestigious position. So some congressmen took advantage of it and were taking hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars in gifts over time. So Congress has since then passed laws to try to prevent that kind of corruption. So you can't receive a gift greater than, if I recall correctly, it was $25. And then it's $25 within a certain period of time too. So it's I remember one time we got in a bag, somebody dropped off a bag of ball caps, and we couldn't accept it because just kind of looking at it, the baseball caps were each one was going to be about $20, and there were 5 of them. It's this is over $100. We cannot accept it. You must take it out of here. I remember somebody baked us a pan of brownies. And so, our boss was like, okay, well, that's probably under $25, so we can accept it. But nobody wanted to eat it because, what were those brownies laced with? You'd never know. Obviously, they could have been just perfectly fine, but then also they could have been laced with a drug or a poison. And so it's nobody wanted to eat it. You never know. So again, a couple of definitions we need to get into as an incumbent. There are certainly disruptive issues. So sometimes an issue may cause an incumbent to be ejected from office, whether it's being kicked out by the congressman or, by Congress itself. Congress can actually vote to kick you out if you're particularly bad, or just lose. You just do things bad enough where come re-election, nobody supports you anymore. You either get primaried by your own party or you lose the general election by the opposing party. And this is especially possible or plausible if the issue becomes if issues surrounding you become too controversial, and then that's when congressional members can be voted out again by the constituency or by the Congress. So in more recent incidents, congressmen get voted out by the constituencies all the time, especially in those districts in which the vote is the registered population is a little bit closer. But in one instance, House Majority Leader of the Republican Party, Eric Cantor, in 2014, he was part of a group of congressmen known as the Young Guns. It was Mike McCarthy and Rand Paul. And then they were considered these young guns. They rose in power very quickly in Congress. They were very conservative, and people really started to like them, except for Eric Cantor's district. Nationally, he was liked because he was, real tough conservative, yada, 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 part of the young guns. But locally, he was seen as too arrogant and too, didn't really care about his constituency. And he was primaried by a local Republican professor, professor who happened to be Republican, and the professor beat him, and he ended up being the highest ranking member of leadership to ever be primaried. It was and lose. It was pretty crazy. I don't know, maybe it wasn't ever, but it was the highest in a long time. And so it was just he just was deemed a little bit. Oh, I forgot I had the notes here. He was deemed a little bit too moderate for Republicans, again in his district primarily. And then just seen as too disconnected and to his constituents, and was then seen as arrogant, like he kind of deserved the position or whatever. Personal misconduct, though, can really get you in trouble, and and there are times where congressmen and even presidents can get in trouble and get involved in sex issues or there's a word I'm looking for there, but regardless. Those kinds of things, sex scandals, actually, that was the word, or money. So, very recently, Anthony Weiner was a congressman from New York who was forced to resign in 2011 because it became public that he was sexting over Twitter. He literally was doing it publicly, something just total schmuck. And so that became a big national thing. He was married, too. He was married to a very high-ranking, or not high-ranking, but powerful Democrat lobbyist. In fact, I think his wife actually worked for Hillary Clinton, who was running for president at the time. And so he had been sexting, and then he had on through Twitter, and then he had admitted to doing it with multiple women. It was just idiot. So he got kicked out. And then William Jefferson was also a Democrat. Now, I forget where he was from. I think he was from the South. He got embroiled in corruption, bribery, and racketeering issues. And in 2009 was actually kicked out in 2008. And in 2009, he was sentenced to 13 years in prison. He had stolen or accepted millions of dollars. And he had family members that were embroiled. It was this big conspiracy. He was arrested and then sentenced, convicted and sentenced to 13 years in prison. So, yeah, idiot. So another pitfall of incumbency is midterm elections. And that is because in 21 of the last 25 midterm elections, so these are the elections that occur midway through a president's term. So our next midterm election is going to be next fall in 2022. A general election is when the president is on the ballot. A midterm election is when the president is not on the ballot. And so the presidential election is 2020, which means the midterm is 2022, which means the next general election is 2024, which means the following midterm election is 2026, which means the next presidential election is 2028, so on and so forth. So in 21 of the last 25 midterm elections, and it's those elections that occur midway through a president's term, the president's party has lost House seats. So theoretically, historically, it means that come 2022, Republicans are going to pick up seats and are, at the moment, we're still a little over a year out, 13 months out from the elections. Republicans are currently projected to take control of the House. It's projected to be a pretty big red wave. And just so some history on that, in 2018, Donald Trump, the Republican, had control of the House. So when he took office in 2016, he actually had control of both the House and the Senate. Democrats gained 83 seats in the House and took control of it, so proving this tradition right. In 2014, the second midterm election for Donald Trump, for Barack Obama, excuse me, Republicans gained 26 seats and expanded control of the House. So again, which means the Democrats lost seats. In 2010, Obama's first midterm election, Republicans gained 126 seats and took control of the House. In 2006, George W. Bush's second midterm, Democrats gained 61 seats and took control, of the House. And then in 2002, Republicans actually gained seats in the House and 15 seats and expanded control. That one, though, was seen pretty much as an aberration, but it was because it was on the heels of 9/11, and by that point, the United States was entering its non-war in Iraq and Afghanistan, and so nationally was kind of seen as let's not rock the ship. Let's keep, the nation essentially with this election, kind of just said, let's keep Republicans in control. Let's not rock the ship. Let's stay on this direction. Let's end this thing, and as best we can. And now it's finally over 18 years later. So, but anyway, of the last 5 years, 2 of them have actually held where Republicans have expanded control in 2014 and 2002. But then the other 3 have played into the history of the opposing party of the president gaining control. So again, history is on Republican side in 2022. And then, of course, you have primary election challenges as another pitfall of the incumbency. If you're not doing well enough where your base isn't happy, then you might not even get to the general election because you could be primaried, so somebody else in your party runs against you, and then they might beat you. So that was Eric Cantor again. Think of him in Virginia in 2014. And this isn't what happened to us in 2012. We actually were faced against another Republican incumbent. There were 2 incumbents against each other, which is a very, very rare thing, but it's another situation all on its own. It was actually because of this, redistricting. So every 10 years, the Constitution mandates that the federal government does a population census, and that is, they count all the people. They count all citizens. Now, the federal government knows exactly how many Americans are here, and then they know where they all reside, and then every 10 years, they redraw the district lines. The states will then redraw the district lines so that they can reproportion congressmen. So again, the way it's supposed to be is that congressional districts are supposed to be at a certain size, and right now it's about 750,000 people per district, and they have to be equal, so that way all congressmen are representing an equal number of people. Well, obviously over 10 years, populations shift, so they have to redraw the lines to then catch up with where do the populations go, and then so the districts take on different shapes. So that is actually what got us in 2012, is we had redistricting. The district we were in had been a solid red Republican district for the last 10 years, which is why then we were thinking, okay, we're going to be in office 10 years. There's no way that they're going to mess up our district. And they didn't, per se. The district that was redrawn with us in it was a very Republican district. However, it was also the district that another Republican, a lot of the population was from, was that of another Republican solid district. And so they placed us against each other, and the other guy won. So that occurs, the redistricting occurs every 10 years. States are required by law to have House districts as equally in population as possible. Again, it's about 750,000 people per district. So every House member, at least once the new district lines are drawn, should represent very, very close to the same number of people. Again, things change over 10 years, but that's why, because of the census every 10 years, the lines get redrawn. Let's see, it's not a constitutional requirement. The districts are not a constitutional requirement. So the Constitution outlined how many congressmen there are supposed to be based on population, but they did not say that they needed to be elected to specific districts or the districts specifically needed to exist. Hypothetically, a congressman could be elected in what is called a, now I'm not remembering the term. It's called, it's like open something. I forget what the term is, but regardless, where you're just running for House in your state and you kind of represent everybody. But that isn't what happened. It's kind of just evolved into districts where you just represent a small group of people. Small as a relative term, of course, about 750,000. And then gerrymandering, which I referenced earlier, is when the party that controls the legislature because the lines are redrawn by your state legislature, and in Arizona, the legislature has given that power to what is known as the Independent Redistricting Committee, which is a committee of, I believe it's 7, 3 Republicans, 3 Democrats, and 1 air quote independent. I'm not gonna lie to you, if you think you're an independent, you're lying to yourself. There's no such thing as an independent. Everybody just kind of naturally leans one direction or the other. You might be moderate, but there's no such thing as an independent. I will independently vote Republican. Well, yeah, all Republicans independently vote Republican. Nobody's forcing a Republican to vote Republican. So anyway, it's the Independent Redistricting Committee. There's 3 Republicans, 3 Democrats, and then 1 air quote independent. And gerrymandering is when the majority party draws lines that benefits the majority party. So again, legislatures in most states are the ones that draw the lines. However, some states like Arizona, the legislature gave that power to an independent redistricting committee, so the way the legislature could worry about other things and not have to quibble over drawing lines. And then it was supposed to be seen as more fair because it's 3-3. You're guaranteed equal number of Republicans and Democrats, and then you've got this one like independent who breaks the ties. And so gerrymandering then, of course, is when they draw the lines to just benefit the majority party, which then obviously gives them the ability to maintain control forever. There we go. Okay, we're almost done. So House leadership, the Constitution provides that the House of Representatives will be presided over by a speaker who was then the title Speaker of the House, who is elected by a vote of House members. And of course, the majority party will be the one who ultimately selects the speaker because, if the Republicans have control of the House, they're not going to elect a Democrat because the Democrat is in control of the speaker is in control of a lot of the bills that are heard. Just like Democrats, like right now, Nancy Pelosi is a Democrat because the Democrats are in control. They weren't going to elect a Republican. So the speaker is said to be the most powerful political leader in Washington other than the president because they are in control of the House debate. And they are in control of what laws get voted on, and of course, okay, there's the equivalent in the Senate, yes, but the Senate oversees, there are only 100 senators, whereas there are 435 congressmen, so you're in control of, a larger swath of people over here in the House, therefore you also have further control. You are also further more powerful because you are second in line to the presidency behind the vice president. If the president dies or resigns, the vice president immediately assumes the presidency. Well, then if the vice president dies or has to resign, then the Speaker of the House becomes the President of the United States. Senate Pro Temp is 4th. The Senate Majority Leader, which is the Senate Pro Temp, is 4th. So it's they're very powerful. The interesting thing is the Constitution does not actually say that the Speaker of the House has to be a congressman. The House of Representatives could elect you to be Speaker and put you in control of the debate of the, and what bills are proposed and voted on and so forth. So they actually literally, an average citizen can be the Speaker because the Speaker also does not cast a vote. Now, being that never has the Congress ever elected anybody other than one of their own to be the Speaker, of course, does have a vote because the Speaker is a congressman. But just because you're Speaker of the House doesn't mean that you have a vote. That's just a title, which means if they elected you, for instance, you could do everything. You just wouldn't have a vote. So it's kind of interesting that it was written that way, that kind of flexibility was given to Congress to decide. But it's also kind of cool that hypothetically, the Congress is never going to call one of us, who are we, to be Speaker. But hypothetically, they could. So the Speaker has the right to speak first during House debate on legislation and has the power to recognize members and say, I recognize the Speaker from Massachusetts, granting them the permission to speak on the House floor. And then the House places time limits on the ability to speak on a bill, so the Speaker can influence the passage of the bill by deciding on how long a House member can speak. So they can say, all right, we're only going to debate, you're only going to have 30 seconds to speak on any one issue, or you're going to have 5 minutes, or you're going to have 10 minutes, which can elongate things and really thresh things out. So pretty interesting. The Speaker also assigns bills to committees and places which committee they go to, and places time limits on reporting bills and assigns members to conference committees. So, and it's the committees who actually see bills first. So do I have it in here? No, I don't. So essentially, when a congressman writes a bill, it doesn't go straight to the House leadership, House floor. It goes into committee, and every congressman sits on at least 2, if not 3 committees, and then a number of subcommittees. And so then those committees are actually who debates on bills first and decides whether or not it deserves to go to House leadership, and then the Speaker will then decide if it gets voted on. The Speaker is assisted by the House Majority Leader and the House Majority Whip, whom both direct members of the party on how to vote and when to vote. So a better understanding of the role of Whip is right here. I really hope you can hear this. You should be able to. It'll just...
Hey, do you know what the whip does? What whip? The whip in the Senate and the House? Well, you know, in the old days when the senators didn't vote the way that the party leaders wanted them to, they whipped them. You better vote the way we want you to, or there's going to be big trouble.
That is not true.
Hey, do you know what the whip does?
That is not true, but it's obviously funny to think of. The whip, you're whipping up votes. You know, you're trying. The whip's job is on the floor as debates are going, and the Speaker says we're going to vote on something. The whip's job is, okay, are you voting on this? Are you voting on this? What can I do to get you to vote on this? What do we need to do? What do we, blah, blah, blah. So he's just whipping up votes. Kind of think of mixing eggs and batter to get air into it, to get it to fluff up. I mean, you're like fluffing it up like, okay. It's not generally hectic where it's like, oh, what are we going to do? What are you going to do? What are you going to do? They kind of know behind closed doors how everybody's going to vote generally. But that is what it means by whip. So it's just funny. The minority party also has similar House Minority Leader, House Minority Whip, so on and so forth. It's just that their roles are a lot less important because it's the majority that's generally going to get. They have the majority, obviously, of votes. Therefore, they're going to be, it's their bills are going to pass, and it's their amendments, and so on and so forth. But still, I mean, the House does, the minority party still has those positions. So in Senate leadership, in the Senate, the most important role is that of the majority leader. So right now, it's it's not Mitch McConnell right now. Mitch McConnell was the majority leader when the Republicans had control. They are assisted again by party whips. How are you going to vote? The Senate Majority Leader is not the most powerful member of the Senate, however. The Vice President is, as the Vice President is the presiding officer. However, the Vice President only votes in the event of breaking up a tie in the Senate. So because it is an equal number of senators, 100, and the House is an odd number, so they'll never have a tie. It's 435. The only way they would have a tie is if, an odd number of people don't vote for some reason. Then hypothetically could end in a tie, but that's extraordinarily rare. I don't even know of an instance in which there's been a tie in the House. But in the Senate, though, I mean, if all 100 vote, which they most commonly do, then there's a tie. You can be tied 50-50 right now. So that's then when the Vice President will come in. And that's pretty rare as well, but I don't know if Kamala Harris has had to break a tie, but I do know that Mike Pence, former Vice President Mike Pence under Donald Trump, he had to break 1 or 2 ties. So it's very, very rare. So John Adams was the first vice presidential presiding officer, and he said of the position of vice president that it was, quote, the most insignificant office that ever the invention of man contrived or his imagination conceived. Now, the power of the vice president, has evolved over time, but this was at one point kind of the most important position. So another pop culture example of now the vice president, the presiding officer, is of John Adams. So here we go. Again, I really hope you can hear this.
The president must not be allowed to remove cabinet officers on whatever whim. The Senate must advise and consent to their removal the same as to their appointment.
Mr. McLean's bill is an affront to the authority of the executive branch. It seeks nothing less than to indenture the president to this body's will.
Mr. Pinckney, the British parliamentary model may be instructive here.
The Senate would no doubt benefit from the Vice President's learning and erudition on the subject, but I respectfully remind him that barring a tie in voting, he has no say in the matter.
Oh, I am in no need of reminders, Mr. McLean.
I concur with Mr. McClay's opinion. The President must not have unlimited authority in cabinet matters, sir.
So on this vote, ironically, there was a tie. So the Vice President had to cast a vote.
Mr. Pinckney, you will cease! Good heavens. Now, the vote still stands at 15 in favor, 15 against. And as the Senate cannot come to a resolution, the final vote, the deciding vote, falls to this chair.
Falls to his rotundity.
President's wishes are clear.
Mr. Adams casts his vote with the President only because he looks up to the same goal.
I am forced to look up to it, and bound by duty to do so, sir, as there is only one breath of one mortal between me and it.
What?
Okay, well, the what part is what he means is that what Senator said was, you only voted for it because your goal is to be president as well. And John Adams was like, well, I'm forced to and bound by duty because if George Washington dies, one breath of one mortal. If George Washington dies, then I become president. And therefore, yes, if I am president, I would like to have the power to fire my my cabinet members. And so, it was perfectly right there. And then congressional committees, again, bills are first, when they're first presented to the Congress, they go through committee before they ever make it to the House, because the committees then kind of thresh it out and decide what bill is going to make it to the, cuts it and is good enough. And so in 1946, the Legislative Reorganization Act requires that each bill introduced to Congress be referred to the proper committee. So if it's a budget bill, it goes to a budget committee. If it's an agricultural bill, it goes to an agricultural committee. If it's has to do with transportation, it's going to go to a committee that's going to oversee transportation. Sometimes it has to go to multiple committees, and then a primary committee might send it to a subcommittee, so on and so forth. So just depending on how complex it is, or what have you. So depending on where a bill is sent, it may determine whether the bill lives or dies. And this is because due to the political makeup of the committee, maybe the committee just doesn't like the bill. Certainly, let's just say, so all committees are, the majority members of the committee are from the majority party of the House or Senate. So the majority party, it's the Speaker, the Senate Pro Temp, who decides who are the committee members. And so, of course, they're going to pick their guys and girls, their party members, to sit on these committees, and because they're the majority, so they kind of, to the winner go the spoils. And so if a Democrat were to propose a bill and it goes into the appropriate committee, then that committee might just kill it right there. They just might say, oh, we'll discuss it later, and it'll never get discussed. And so it'd be the same with right now. The Democrats are in control of both houses. A Republican can propose a bill, it goes to the appropriate committee, and then they'll go, we'll discuss this later, never to bring it up again. So committees are also ordered based on the party power, but even so, the members making up a particular committee might not be in favor, or might be in great favor of any particular bill, which is then how they might kind of kill it or send it towards the House or Senate leadership. Committee chairs, so you got a committee, and usually they're like 9, I believe it is. It might actually be like 13, but you're going to obviously have a committee chair, the person who's in control, because they hold meetings, so it's like gavel them in and whatever. So the committee chair schedule the committee meetings. They determine the order in which the bills are considered. It's usually depending on importance. They preside over the committee discussions. They kind of control the debate. They direct the committee's majority staff, and they can choose to lead the debate when the bill goes to the floor for a vote as well. So once it's made it through committee, the committee chair then can say, okay, I will represent this bill, they'll discuss it and not the other committee members. So that they obviously have a little bit more responsibility. And then going back to how much money they make over here, right here, if you are a House member and you're the president of committee, you now have more responsibility. You will get more money. You'll probably get a little extra staff, yada, yada, yada. And that is it. Wait a second. What is the, okay. Did I not? Give me a moment. Okay, this looks funny. So I actually don't have an assignment for you guys. I just need you to send me notes that says that you looked through this and, the proofs that you watched this whole thing. So I need to just see notes throughout and then email those to me. If you handwrite notes, just send me a picture, email me a picture to my official, my email, or, hand typed just in a doc file and then just title it, like your name notes, just so I know. And that's it. And so by the time you guys watch this, Blaze should be born. So I'll definitely have some pictures and videos, and I'll upload probably a couple of pictures to Halo so you guys can just see. And otherwise, and if I don't or forget, then I'll definitely have photos to show you guys on Wednesday. I see you guys Wednesdays, Friday. I'll have those for you on Friday, So you'll get to see them this week. But we go into the hospital in like 9 hours. It's pretty crazy. I'm already exhausted, so I haven't bored yet. All right, everybody. I love you all. I hope you had a great weekend. I can't wait to see you guys again. This is a Wednesday, Friday class, so I'll see you guys on Friday. Thank you. See ya.